Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay and our guest today is Dr. Jude Currivan. Hello Jude.
Hi Ian.
And Jude you're actually a healer, a cosmologist and an author and many other things. And you've actually written 3 books that I have here. We have the 8th chakra, the 13th step, and your latest one with Ervin Laszlo is called Cosmos.
It is.
And the basis of today's programme will be about the book The Cosmos. But we're also going to talk a little bit about you and your past and how you got to be where you are in terms of able to write these books. And you were telling me earlier that you actually had some interesting spiritual experiences when you were just 4 years old.
I did. I grew up in the north of England and my dad was a coal miner.
Right.
My mum was a housewife. And when I was 4 years old, one night I was settling down to sleep and a discarnate presence, a light, came into my room. And, you know, as a 4-year-old kid, you know, it's the most natural thing in the world. And
Were you a bit scared?
No, I was curious.
You were fascinated.
I was fascinated. I was curious. And afterwards, when I began to know who the presence was, it was so loving. It was so wonderfully loving that how could I be scared? And over the next literal weeks, months, I started to get fascinated by astronomy, quantum physics, would you believe?
At 4 years
old?
At
4 years old, yeah. At 4 years
Wow.
old. And ancient wisdom teachings, because the presence over that time frame told me that it was Thoth, who was the ancient wisdom bringer to Egypt.
Right.
And this carried on for years. And funnily enough, although my fascination with trying to understand not just how the world is as it is, but why, which is a lifelong quest that I write about and I share with people around the world, I was always very open with that and hugely curious. And my mum, especially, because Dad died when I was 10 and my brother was 7, so she brought us up from then. She was always hugely, hugely supportive of my journey. But I never mentioned my walking between worlds, which is what Thoth was guiding me to do. I was having clairaudient, kinesthetic, clairvoyant experiences, literally walking between worlds.
So what does that mean in practical terms, walking between worlds?
It meant that, well, eventually it meant that I've had levitation experiences, I've had Kundalini experiences.
So, okay, for people that don't know much about these things, levitation means actually you can rise from the floor in your body.
I literally had, and I speak about it in my book, The 13th Step, an experience in Abydos in Egypt at a place called the Osirian. And I actually, it's a whole experience we probably don't have time to explore today. But I was there and I was guided to go down into this subterranean temple, very, very ancient temple. And I was working at that time because I worked with many discarnate presences over the years, angels, ascended masters, deities, many levels of consciousness. And I was working with the Egyptian deities or principles of consciousness, such as Osiris and Isis and Horus at the time. And I was guided to go down into this place. And as I did, I noticed that it was, because it was subterranean, there was a little bit of water on the floor of it, about 4 inches of water. And I just had this real urge to take my shoes off, roll my jeans up and go into the inner sanctum. So I did that. I walked 2 steps and fell down a 35-foot shaft filled with water. And as the water went over my head, the words that came was, "This is my initiation," and literally within a split second, and I remember going down, and I was definitely still going down, the water was over my head, within a split second I was back on the steps, soaking wet.
Wow.
And having a Kundalini experience that left my body feeling on fire for the next 3 days.
Right.
So that was my sense of levitation.
Okay, well, it's dramatic stuff, I have to say. Yeah. And then these experiences presumably continued and guided you in terms of what you wanted to do in life, is that correct?
They did, and originally what I really wanted to do was to become a cosmologist in the sort of scientific sense of the word. And so I went to Oxford and I did a physics master's degree, specialising in quantum physics and cosmology, because I wanted to understand how my experiences of consciousness linked in to what we describe as the physical world. And although it gave me that, if you like, that foundation, it also was in a way very frustrating, because I found that, you know, what was being taught, in my perspective, was so limiting. It was all about the physical world, whereas I'd already not just believed, but knew, had experienced many levels of consciousness. And so it gave me that foundation. And funnily enough, it sort of is another thread in the work that I do now, because part of my work brings leading edge science into this, what I call this mix, which includes leading edge science, frontier research into consciousness, and my own experiences, of course, of that, ancient wisdom, rediscovery of ancient wisdom, again, through Thoth's teachings and many others around the world, and spiritual revelation that's happening now. And they're all coming together, and I share them in my talks and my workshops, and I write about them in my books. And ultimately, the work's about empowering people to empower themselves and to go beyond their own, perhaps, perceived limitations of who they are, and to begin to remember who they really are.
Right, no, absolutely. But I want to just go back a stage before we come into more detail on that, because apparently you worked for HMV and you were your group, you were their, I think, European Group Finance Director. Worldwide Financial Director, which is quite something, really.
It was great fun.
Very responsible job.
It is a responsible job, and they're a fantastic company. And I had the privilege of being with them in the late 80s and very early 90s, and helped them to set up Australia and the States and Japan. And it was great fun. And I then was headhunted and joined Scholl, the foot care people.
Right.
And they too were operating in 36 countries, in fact. So the two together gave me a wonderful experience of working with people around the world, working with people on many different levels, having to learn to communicate, you know, because I think we were saying before we were recording that for me, we can talk a lot. Each of us can speak a lot. But unless the person we're speaking with, not to, but with, understands, and therefore we have a dialogue, a mutual understanding, that's not communication. So those jobs really helped me to be able to do that, and also manage a lot of change.
Grounded too, because you're dealing with millions of pounds. You're responsible to shareholders, and you have to present the figures properly. You know, you've got to sort it, haven't you, in a major way. And
for me, absolutely. And for me, what's important now with this shift, and I know we'll go on to talk about our sense of the shift of consciousness that's happening around the world, for me it's bringing the extraordinary of our multidimensional selves through the, if you like, the ordinariness of our human experience. And for me, therefore, it's about seeing the ordinary in the extraordinary and the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Yes, no, I understand. So the one thing that your book, The Cosmos, which is the basis of today's interview, the one thing that struck me is so true is you talk about breakdown or breakthrough, and we really are at a turning point.
I feel so.
In our society. We can't go on as we are. No. The signs that things are going to break down, although the politicians try and keep it going, it's not looking good. And the average person, you stop them and you ask them, they admit that they're shocked that the bank system nearly went down a few months ago. They didn't expect that a year ago. So things are kind of on the edge. We haven't quite got there yet. And everybody wants to think there is a chance of breakthrough. So I guess this is a question more for the end of the programme. Are we going to make the breakthrough or not? But let's just talk a little bit more about where we are in terms of what's working and what isn't working at the moment.
Well, you know, my sense is that we've brought ourselves to this crisis, and the crisis is on many different levels. It's on resource depletion, it's on population pressures, it's on climate change, it's on the threats of, if you like, terror or nuclear proliferation. All of those things on many, many levels. They, to me, are the symptoms. The deeper cause is our worldview, because for the last several hundred years, we've all followed, not just scientists, but we've all followed as societies, a scientific perspective of the world. Now, I'm a scientist, but I'm a scientist who's experienced multidimensional realities. And so the science that has been in the, if you like, the mainstream, that's underpinned this worldview, is, in my perspective, a very limited science. It's a science that ultimately has so far not really followed the evidence to perceiving a deeper understanding of the cosmos. So whereas the mainstream science says that the world, the universe, is meaningless, is essentially fragmented, is without purpose, and that we're just the random outcomes of evolutionary processes, I think is now, as everything else is falling away. But that reductionist science, and because it's called reductionist science, because it seeks to reduce everything to its basic components, to understand stuff. But as Deepak Chopra once said, that's like taking apart a radio and wondering where the music went to. Essentially, reductionist science is very good. That's its job, of taking things apart. But what it isn't so good at, until far more recently, is actually not just putting them back together again, but seeing that when we do look at something in its entirety, it literally is greater than the sum of its parts. And the other thing that reductionist science has done is it's excluded consciousness. It's seen consciousness solely as an outcome of apparently random evolutionary processes. So there's almost 180-degree turn.
But doesn't it exclude it because it doesn't understand it?
It hasn't followed the evidence. It doesn't
Right.
understand it, therefore it excludes it.
Okay.
But almost a century ago, at the beginnings of quantum physics, and relativity theory, those pioneers were showing that we cannot see ourselves any longer as separate from the cosmos, that time and space is relative to our perspective, that everything is non-locally connected beyond the limits of space and time, and that an observer and an observed are not two different things. They are part of an entirety.
So explain that more.
Right. Before quantum physics, it was assumed as scientists, the whole scientific premise was that you could be an objective viewer of phenomena.
So
and that was
you
how
were a separate person.
You were separate.
I look
that was
at
the
you.
experiment.
Yeah, okay.
You were the scientist, the observer.
Yeah.
The two were separate. You as the observer did not affect the experiment.
Okay.
It moved from being a subjective to an objective experience. And that was one of the basic criteria for the scientific method. Quantum physics, the discoveries of quantum physics, showed that certainly at the quantum level, that just wasn't the case. That when we observe something, when we observe a quantum phenomenon, it actually changes it. And very recent work by an Austrian team in 2007 showed that, to go even beyond that, they showed that we cannot any longer view reality as being objective. It literally, a quantum phenomena only becomes real when it's measured or observed. So we can't separate ourselves. But the physicists have still tried, till very recently, to say that, fine, but that's just at the quantum scale. But over the last few years, scientists have been able to show such non-local, integral relationship between much bigger entities. They've, to the extent of organic molecules being non-locally connected. And those people who've been studying consciousness have shown over many years, and more, the databases are building up, that our consciousness is connected at these non-local levels. Our minds are connected at these non-local levels.
So quantum physics and consciousness somehow come to the same conclusions.
Yes, different directions. Yeah. But essentially what that means, if we're non-locally connected through our consciousness, we can't somehow put consciousness to one side when we're trying to understand the world.
Exactly, it's all part of the same thing.
It's all part of the same thing. Yeah. And even more recently, people who've been studying information, people who are computer scientists, are actually coming into the fray and realising that the mathematics that describe how information is held and processed is the same mathematics that describe a hologram.
Okay.
And cosmologists at the same time are starting to describe our entire universe using exactly the same mathematics of the hologram. So from these different directions, and also another direction, which is that scientists who are researching complex systems, such as weather patterns, even, and we'll come to this, perhaps conflicts, but weather patterns, ecosystems, all of those complex systems are using the same mathematics. So from complex systems research, whether it's the natural world or we'll talk about, I hope, man-made systems, whether it's from cosmology of looking at the universe as its entirety, whether it's computer scientists looking at information, whether it's other scientists, just mathematics, just theorising, all are converging into a perspective that, one, we can no longer exclude consciousness from this exploration. It is the very heart, it's the very essence of it. And secondly, that all that we call reality is we need to start really understanding as being integral. And thirdly, that what we call reality is expressed through holographic processes, which means that first of all, everything is whole, a whole world. Secondly, all reality is integral, rather like different, frequencies along a spectrum. And that thirdly, because of the holographic nature of the universe and everything in it, including us, that the universe, as well as being whole, is harmonically interconnected on every scale of experience, from the most minute quantum scale and way below that to the most minute, what's called the Planck scale, up to the entirety of the universe.
Well, you've covered a lot of information there. So I'm going to pick up on the theory of the hologram for people that aren't completely clear. From what I understand, a hologram, basically, that means that everything is in this one tiny thing. It may just be a hologram itself, may be a very small thing, but it contains the whole in some way. Am I being oversimplistic there? Or?
No, you're describing it very well. I mean, if I give you the sort of the modern description of the hologram and then an ancient description of the hologram, we can bring the two together perhaps. I mean, the modern description of a hologram is that if you take a beam of light, and it's what's called a coherent beam of light. In other words, the light's all the same frequency and it's pointing in the same direction. You're creating a beam, a laser, in effect. You split that beam into two. One beam bounces off a mirror, the other beam bounces off an object. It could be an apple, it could be you. The two beams are then brought back together on a flat screen. And what they do is they create a sort of pattern that, after rain, and you look in a puddle, and if there's been a bit of oil, there's this wonderful wave-like pattern in the puddle. Yeah. Well, a holographic plate looks like that. Then after that, you beam another light, coherent beam through it. You then recreate that original three-dimensional object. Yeah? The beauty of that holographic object, whether it be an apple or you, is if you were then to sort of split it into 1,000,000 pieces, for example, every single millionth bit would replicate the entirety of the whole.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
Now, because of that, it means that there's a resonance, there's a harmonic resonance. You scale up and you scale down within a hologram. Every, if you like, facet of the hologram reflects every other facet. Yeah? Okay. So we are both the one that is expressed through the diversity of the many, and we are at the microcosm, one of the diverse many, through which the one is expressed.
Okay, because you also in the book, you talk about the A field, the Akashic Field, yes, which is, I guess, the same principle, isn't it?
It is, but let me just go back a step to that's the modern description of, if you like, a hologram. Buddha described this 2,500 years ago.
Okay.
And he described it as what's also been known as the web or the net of Indra. And he described the universe as being composed of a myriad of jewels. Every jewel has multiple, many facets, and each facet reflects every other facet, and each jewel is connected by golden threads of light. Now, that is, to me, the most beautiful, poetic description of what, in a scientific perspective, we'd call the cosmic hologram. In other words, everything reflecting, resonating, interconnecting with each other on many levels of awareness to form the entirety of cosmic mind exploring itself. Onto the A field.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, in the book you mentioned the A field, which I think is the Akashic Field, and it seems to be that slightly similar because all the information is actually held everywhere. It doesn't always make sense in a logical way, but
exactly.
Can you talk more about that?
Well, the Akashic Field, again, is a very ancient concept that when Ervin and I co-wrote Cosmos, we just felt would be a really helpful way to explore and share this understanding. But essentially, to the ancients, the Akashic Field was all-pervading space, all knowledge, literally cosmic mind, the basis from which everything essentially arises, is explored and returns to. And so people maybe, our viewers may be aware of something called the quantum vacuum. Over recent years, physicists have understood that the so-called vacuum of space is not empty. It's a seething mass of virtual quantum particles or entities that arise and create reality and then fall back.
Incredible energy there as well, from what I've heard.
Huge, enormous energy. Yeah. But you see, most even leading edge science has treated it rather as a maelstrom, if you like, of energy. Again, Deepak Chopra once described it as the field of all possibilities. But essentially, it's far more than that. It actually is the foundation of, it's a plenum, it's a foundation of information. And it's very difficult. We use words almost to separate rather than bring together. So for mystics, it's more an experience than to be able to be expressed in words. But essentially, we would describe it as the plenum, the cosmic mind from which everything arises, is explored, is played out and returns to. But it is all that is. It's not just a base level. We cannot separate anymore mind from matter. Yes. Body from soul.
But so in the quantum vacuum is basically all the information there is?
Yes.
That's a fantastic thing, isn't
yes.
it? And the quantum vacuum is so tiny, yet it contains all the information of everything that's ever been, is, and ever will be. Is that right?
Well, it's not tiny. What is tiny? What is large? When we're working on all these levels,
okay,
it sort of goes beyond that. I mean, what seems to be happening? The best look at it that leading edge science, I think, is coming to at the moment is, and we do write about this in our book, and this is our perspective, is yes, we need to go beyond even the quantum vacuum. We need to perceive that everything that we call reality is integral. Therefore, the quantum vacuum, the A field of information, is all an integral aspect of cosmic mind. What perhaps the A field can be considered is a causative level from which the templates of what we call physical, the physical would arise from. The mathematicians describe this as phase space. In other words, consciousness intentionalizes patterns of experience and exploration. Those patterns are fractal. Those patterns underlie then and are expressed through the cosmic hologram we call the physical world.
You see, you also talk about, I'm not sure how this directly ties in, but you also talk about in the book that we only ever experience a maximum of 4% of reality. 96%, I think you call it, dark matter, is hidden away, and it's not something we can access from the human experience at all.
I never said that in the book. I said that actually cosmologists currently can only explain with their theories 4% of what they
Yes.
actually feel is comprising the physical universe. And you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. They describe the other so-called missing 90% as dark matter
Yes.
or dark energy, of which really nobody knows what they are or they are not.
Yes. Is that connected with a quantum vacuum, or is that something separate?
Well, the thing is, it can, of course, everything's connected. Everything's interconnected. All it is at the moment there's a gap between what the perception is becoming and the theories that describe it. And the problem you've got with even the 4% that science, mainstream science, is ostensibly describing, the theories they have to describe the very small, the
Yes.
quantum world, are not compatible with the theories used to describe the large-scale world, which are the theories of relativity. So fundamentally, those two theories do not come together. They're not compatible, because large-scale relativity doesn't describe a quantized world, and quantum theory doesn't recognise the relativity of space and time. It still works with a passive space-time background. So after 80 years of trying,
It's like two different languages.
it's like two different languages of the very small and the larger.
Yeah.
And what's really missing in all of this is consciousness.
That's right. That's right.
Very hard.
Yeah,
the elephant in the room is
Yeah,
consciousness.
yeah.
So it really does feel, though, that we have a very rapidly emerging new vision where all of this is brought together. And at the heart is the understanding of consciousness, and how consciousness intentionalizes what we call reality, and how reality is co-created through holographic, fractal, harmonic processes.
Okay, it's a lot of long words.
I
there,
know, I apologise, but you know, our viewers, it's like when the quantum theory came out,
Yeah.
for a long time people use quantum now in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
But, 80 years ago, very, very few people had any conception of what quantum theory was about, or relativity theory. It's
Yes.
now in our common language.
Yes.
But we're moving so quickly now. And it seems to me that the word hologram, and understanding the cosmic hologram, understanding how consciousness plays out through these processes, is something that really is going to be key to our new emerging perception of ourselves and the world and the whole world.
Yeah.
And certainly, even if viewers, and I hate to use the word ordinary because to me everyone's extraordinary, but perhaps our viewers will bear with me when I say ordinary people may not need to get the intricacies of this, but scientists do. It's rather like, when we buy a car, I don't know how the engine works. You probably do, I don't.
No, I
but
don't.
there are mechanics who do, thank goodness.
Yeah.
So it's rather the same, but I know enough about cars to drive one. Our viewers, in my perspective, when we understand that the world, the cosmos is meaningful, not meaningless, therefore has purpose, and we have purpose, that ultimately it is a whole world, and what we call reality is integral, that it's played through holographic process, which means it's harmonic on every scale, and that ultimately we are co-creators of our realities. And that what this shift is about is moving from a worldview that's very limiting, where perhaps we've confined ourselves in our human ego-based perspective. The shift is expanding our awareness. It's moving us from a very polarised worldview and a fragmented worldview to a much more empowering and whole worldview of ourselves. And so understanding what we write about in Cosmos, of an emerging vision of integral reality, even if people don't understand, the gaskets and the gubbins that is the engine, is to understand enough to become a conscious co-creator.
Okay. So going back to when we talked earlier about breakdown or breakthrough, and I was saying that I think we were both agreeing that people kind of recognise that, maybe not in a way that's very practical, but they realise this is going on. Where does that leave us practically in a way to move forward? So we move towards the breakthrough rather than encourage the breakdown.
Okay. It's a big subject, and again, we talk a lot about it in Cosmos, because the subtitle of Cosmos is a co-creator's guide to the whole world.
Right.
So it's what can we do? It's set in the context of this new emerging vision of reality, but it's going way, and it's talking about us, our consciousness, who we really are, but then it's going way beyond that to say, okay, that's the context. Now, what does it mean in the way that we are in the world, how we see ourselves, how we are with each other, the choices we make? Now, as I said earlier, you know, we're at this global crisis of potential breakdown because of the choices we've made, because of our worldview, the worldview we've had and the choices we've made from that worldview of fragmentation and meaningless and the Earth's passive and limitless and all the rest of it. So we've come to that point with that worldview. What we write about in Cosmos is a whole new worldview and ourselves as co-creators. Einstein once said, and many others have paraphrased this, you can't solve a problem from the same awareness that created it. Yeah. So if we just had that same awareness, I don't believe we could leap to a breakthrough. But consciousness, as I've experienced directly since I was 4 years old, plays out and explores itself on many, many different levels of awareness. And it seems to me that what is happening now, that people are calling the shift, isn't just working its way out at sort of this level of awareness, but that it is a much, much bigger picture, and that we have huge cosmic support and our own higher guidance and self-support in making the shift. We are waking up. We are beginning to go beyond the limits of our personality and become aware that we are more, much, much more than our limited human persona. And that's happening spontaneously around the world. And as it does, we're beginning to see each other and the world with different eyes, literally. You know, there's an old adage that says seeing is believing. We know from experiments into consciousness that it really is the other way around. It's believing is seeing. What we can believe, what we can imagine, what we can dream, we can make real. We know that from quantum experiments. We know that from experiments into consciousness. When we begin to wake up, as we are doing more and more and more rapidly and with more and more people, we begin to believe, because we can believe, because we can dream, because we have that greater awareness, we begin to see the world in a new way. We begin to become more and more conscious co-creators. Now that's been the spiritual journey of mystics throughout the ages. You know, there have always been three ways to experience the world through the spiritual traditions and the wisdom traditions of the past. One is the way of the mind. I describe it as the way of the sage. One is the way of the heart, the way of the shaman. One is the way of the purpose, which I say is the way of the seer, the mystic. And it seems to me that this shift, which we're all part of, is bringing those aspects of experience together as we wake up to who we really are. It's bringing our hearts, our minds, our purpose to a higher level of awareness.
But Jude, how does the average person do that? Because now I understand a lot of what you're saying, but the average person is faced with a situation where they have a couple of kids, they're maybe about to lose their job, they have their mortgage, they have all the realities of life, which are somehow overpowering at times.
First of all, please don't underestimate the average person, the so-called ordinary people. I work around the world with ordinary people, and I know that the heroes that are within everybody, yeah? But I think sometimes, and I do feel that in a way it's a lot of the old paradigm, a lot of the old, we talked earlier about the older paradigm of the structures and the fear-based paradigms, essentially, are still working to take us back into an unsustainable pattern that we've been there, bought the T-shirt, time to move on.
Yeah.
to me, and I never said it's easy. I've just written an article for a magazine called I Never Said It's Easy. Yeah. But to me, it is a simple choice of fear or love.
Okay.
When we make our choices through fear, and we know this through, many, many different surveys, experiments into consciousness around the world, our whole being pulls in. Our whole energy reduces. Fear drains us. Fear disempowers us. In the World War II, it was, Roosevelt said, "We've nothing to fear but fear itself." We really need to understand the truth of that, the reality of that. We either retreat into fear or we leap into love. And that's true whether, on whatever journey, whatever role in life you're in, because each of us are eternal spiritual beings having a human experience. And if we retreat into fear, then fear is what we'll find.
No, I understand that, but I'm also trying to make this as accessible as we can.
Sure.
In terms of people who are watching it who have a genuine feeling that their life can't go on as the way they are. We were talking before we started recording that people are becoming more and more aware of that.
Absolutely.
And yet somehow it's so interesting because in one way things are more interconnected than they've ever been, and people know what's happening on the other end of the globe within a few seconds because we have satellite television that almost so fast. In another way, it's harder for people to take responsibility on individual level because in our food chain, it's so we rely so much on the outside, our power, the electricity and everything, the postal service, everything relies on a big organisation. And so how does the I say ordinary person, I include myself in this.
And so do I include
so
myself
how do I,
in
I'll
this.
keep it personal, how do I take those steps in a practical way, not to support the breakdown, which is like, gathering momentum in a way, the breakdown.
Yes.
And
so
somehow yes, I agree, redirect and support the breakthrough. How does that happen in practical terms? I can say, okay, I can pick up your words and say, I shouldn't go into fear, I should go more into love. I understand that in one way, but that's not always the most practical solution to a situation.
If I thought love was just fuzzy, and nice to have, I wouldn't be as passionate as I am about saying these words. For me, love is the most powerful force in the cosmos. When 9/11 happened, the people who were in that horrendous situation, the last thoughts they were having were not of fear or the hate that rises from it or whatever. The number of them that were wanting to in some way connect with their loved ones was overwhelming. And so let's not see love as somehow not practical, please. I think that's the sort of the crock we've been given about, oh, well, love's nice to have, but I can't do it today because I don't have time, because I don't have the money. Rubbish. It's about what choices we make, and those choices are from the most minute, it's like quantum, to the universal scale. What choices do you make in terms of the food you buy? What choices do you make in terms of... people have been, till now, working very, very hard, trying to get lots of money. We've been sent to buy stuff that we don't actually need. More is not better. More is destroying the ecosphere, destroying the harmony with the world, is unsustainable. But what we've been given is a worldview that says we have to be consumers, we have to go and buy.
Because it doesn't make us happier.
It doesn't make us happier.
Yep.
We've been time poor and stuff rich. But what it's been like, the food that we've eaten, the processed food, is actually starving us, because it doesn't have the energy and the nutrition that we had 50 years ago in food.
Because the soil's depleted.
Because the soils are depleted. Yeah. There's more and more processed food. So, it's been more about not realising that we don't need more stuff, recognising that when we do need stuff, more and more people are going to charity shops, going to recycling places, recycle, reuse, reduce the amount. It's not about a poverty mentality. I describe it as, we describe people with money as wealthy. Most people I know with a lot of money are not wealthy. I describe it as being moneyed. They have money.
Okay.
But for me, it's about health, healthy wealth. And we have abundance in our lives on so many levels. I mean, my husband and I are just doing a beekeeping course. His face on Saturday, when we started the beekeeping course and watched the bees, I've never seen him look so happy. And we're going to get a hive. We're fortunate enough, we live in the country and we can do that.
It's a great idea, though, because the old bees are having a bit of a bad time at the moment.
Absolutely.
So it's a great idea.
So we're going to have our hive in a month's time. We already grow our own veg. And even if we live in the city, of course, most people do, from a grow bag, it's amazing how much you can grow. Yeah. It's about buying food in season and locally. Right. It's about making your choices. It's about, if you're on the internet, there's a wonderful website called Avaaz, Avaaz, which is a global community of activists who are bringing an understanding of positive things that we can do. We can go out, we can volunteer. If we now become less money, but we will reduce, we're not consumers, we're living a sort of a joyous, abundant, healthy life, we have more time. So let's volunteer, let's get together in community groups. Let's do more things that our previous generations did, that this whole, message that we've been given through advertising and the media and all the rest of it, which is about fear and scarcity, is a nonsense.
Yeah, so this message you're saying about we're co-creators, there's practical things we can really do in our lives. They may in themselves appear to be quite small steps, but somehow it feeds the breakthrough.
It does.
Otherwise, rather than supporting the breakdown.
And it is the hologram at work. Because what we do, Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher, said, again, 2,500 years ago, for peace in the nation, there has to be peace in the region. If there's peace in the region, there has to be peace in the city. Peace in the city means peace in the home. Peace in the home is peace in the family. Peace in the family is peace in the heart. It comes from each and every one of us, and then it goes out. Yeah.
Which is a whole another area which fascinates me personally as well, the whole thing of human conflict.
Yes, and I work a lot with human conflicts around the world, because as a healer, I know I've worked with many, many thousands of people around the world in what I call the universal heart of the 8th chakra. It's the same patterns, of course. And so, I've worked for many years around the world in service to healing, not just on a personal level, but on more and more on a collective level.
Do you feel in the world we're having now more conflict or less conflict than we used to have?
I feel that the conflicts that remain are rather like our deepest patterns. It's like when we go through our own personal healing.
Yes.
The easy stuff comes first. We're okay to look at that. We can sort that, and we take another step in our inner development, if you like, our inner healing and growth. It feels to me that what's left as conflicts around the world are at the deepest level of our collective psyche, such as the Middle East.
Right, so there's something about the conflict in the Middle East which actually reflects something unresolved
within us,
in ourselves. That's really interesting. So just talk more about that, how people can maybe identify that within themselves.
Well, the ancient peoples, the ancient Vedic Indian traditions that sort of first talked about chakras, energy vortices within us, also described our consciousness in human form, coming through three universal cosmic aspects. If you like, the cosmic principles of the negative, the positive, the neutral. We would call it the divine feminine, masculine and child energies. They saw all consciousness working through a trinity in this way. And even the Chinese tradition that talks about the polarities of yin and yang talks about them coming together into the balance point, the third, if you like. So what I would say is that more and more as healers, as understanding our psyche, we talk about the bringing back of the divine feminine. But within us, it's healing the relationship, healing that aspect of ourselves, the feminine and the masculine and the child and bringing them together, if you like. Again, heart, mind, purpose, the Trinity into one, the resolution into one. So for me, what the Middle East is primarily about is a deep, deep wounding in what I would call the divine masculine energy, the wounded masculine that mystics and philosophers have talked around and about for a very, very long time.
But how does that manifest in the ordinary person?
It manifests in the ordinary person in one way that I think really does resonate through the Middle East. And that's if you go back in the history of the Middle East and the three religions that really play out there of Islam and Christianity and Judaism, all three religions trace their roots back to the patriarch Abraham, about 4,000 years ago.
Right.
And if you read the various traditions of Abraham, Abraham in the Bible was willing to sacrifice his son on the direction of Yahweh, Jehovah, God. Okay, and there's a sense of an unwillingness of sacrifice in that energy, in that patterning, an unwilling sacrifice. You go through the traditions of Islam back to that time, and for Islam, it's not Isaac who Abraham was to sacrifice, which of course is the Christian Judaic tradition, it's Ishmael, who was a half-brother of Isaac. So, and from Islam tracing back to Ishmael, Judaism, Christianity tracing back to Isaac, you have, if you like, schism between brothers. And if you actually trace our energy, our collective back, this schism between brothers has played out so that it's conflicts between peoples.
Yeah.
If you trace back the unwilling sacrifice, it goes sort of father to son. So what you have at that time, if you like, in our collective psyche, is an energetic cross of wounding. Father to son going down generations, brother to brother going across generations. You have literally a cross on which we've all crucified ourselves.
So what we're saying is that a conflict we might have with our brother or our father, if that's unresolved, energetically, that's somehow feeding the war in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Or the,
Yeah. There's a wounded masculine within
so we all have a
of us.
role to play.
And whether they're absolutely, and within us, whether we are born as men or women, each of us has that threefold masculine, feminine, child energies within us. They play out in different ways, they're complementary, right. But the wounded masculine in you playing out in that way, within me too, is playing out that way. And how the feminine reacts to that within the masculine. You know, as we've gone through conflicts, many conflicts have also continued through a divine feminine imbalance with the masculine. So it's how do we heal within ourselves?
No, that's absolutely fascinating. And we have about 3 minutes left, Jude. I wonder if you want to say in that last 3 minutes just anything more about the book Cosmos, what you cover, just so that we've got a more complete picture.
Well, as I said earlier, Ian, Cosmos is a description of the emerging vision of a whole world, not fragmented, a meaningful world, not meaningless, where everything is consciousness exploring itself, and where we are conscious, are co-creators. We're not just creation, we're co-creators of our realities. Yes. And so what the book does, it explains that context. It's an empowering call to wake up to that awareness. And the third part of the book is how can we become more conscious co-creators on personal levels and literally come together collectively. As Barack Obama said, we can do it. Seems to me that this shift of awareness is moving the me to the we. And that's the time we're here. For me, it's incredibly exciting. The old has to fall away for the new to emerge. It's like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. The old has to go, and it's not. And I would just encourage everyone to take this leap into love and on these very practical, everything, we can all do something. We can
That's
all
the
do
important
something.
thing. No, because I know people feel so powerless at times, but you're absolutely right. We can all do something, and somehow collectively it really adds up.
It totally adds up. So it's doing what we can do, whether it seems tiny or whether it seems vast. Anita Roddick once said, you know, if you think you can't do anything because you're small, try sharing a sleeping bag with a mosquito. You know, mosquitoes are tiny, and yet they have an enormous impact around the world. And the other quote I always love is someone that said, "You'll never be given a dream unless you have everything within you to make that dream happen." And I really do believe that. You may not, you know, it's like a relay.
Say that again.
Right, you'll never be given a dream
Yes.
unless you have everything within yourself already to make that dream come true.
Okay.
And, you know, that's not to say, if you think of a dream maybe as a relay race, it may be that you just have the baton for that first stage.
Right.
But if you have that dream, then you've been given the baton. So run with it.
It's a great place to finish. Let's run with our battens, eh?
And pass them on.
Okay, Jude, thank you very much again for coming in.
Thank
this
you,
is
Ian.
Jude's book, co-written with
Dr.
Ervin
Ervin
Laszlo,
Laszlo.
called Cosmos. And thank you very much for watching Conscious TV, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.